It's the 4-month sprint to the playoffs. Every Saturday, a potential upset. Every game, a career is on the line. From Heisman hopefuls to the college football playoff picture, dissect the gridlock that is the weekly rankings. If you want the deepest dive into college football, this is your ticket. Welcome to Gridiron Gridlock, an Empty the Bench Network exclusive, starting now with your host, Trevor Williams.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today, the first week of college football playoffs are now on the horizon. We have a lot of interesting games that we have to cover. We have to recap what happened last night from Alabama to Oklahoma. Now you got, can Miami survive this week of college football against the 12th man of Texas A&M? And you have the group of five taking on Oregon and Ole Miss. A lot of fun, interesting stuff that we got going on here today on Gridiron Gridlock. Like we have in our intro, I'm your host, Trevor Williams, and we're going to give you the best details of what's going on in the world of college football. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you give ETB a nice like, follow, and subscribe to all of our platforms, as well as follow me on my socials to see the latest and greatest of what's going on with Gridiron Gridlock this week and weeks to come, ladies and gentlemen. But without further ado, let's get on the show on the road. We have the recap of Alabama, Oklahoma last night. What a spectacular game that we got. We got a good, I would say, intro to the college football playoffs for this season, ladies and gentlemen, with Oklahoma having a dominant first quarter, putting up 17 points and shutting out Alabama in the first quarter. But we all know what happened, ladies and gentlemen. The tide started to turn and wheels started to spin and the momentum started to roll for the Tide. From there, Alabama started having some key moments. You got some punt return action, a nice, I would say a turnover that came critical in there, stopping Oklahoma when it mattered the most. But now the problem is with this victory for Alabama, ladies and gentlemen, it hurts Notre Dame's case. Like, they wanted Alabama to lose to justify saying that Alabama should have been left out. But now it looks like the committee got the right pick of putting Alabama in over Notre Dame. We'll see what happens next week when Alabama plays Indiana. If they make it to the semifinals, then again, it solidifies their argument for the whole putting them in college football at this point. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those more interesting topics that we have to decipher and figure out what is going on for the most part. But when you start to see the momentum of Alabama right now, like, I still have like the stats for the percentage, a chance for them to win. Alabama was a 50.9% chance to win this football game, and Oklahoma was a 49.1% for the most part, looking at it. So it's very difficult to, I wouldn't say difficult, it was very close on how the matchup would end up setting itself up for everything for the most part. But now they're in it to win. But now the big question is, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to start looking at is the future of Oklahoma. Their playoff record right now in the CFP era is 0-5. The last time they had a team that gave up 17 points was with Baker Mayfield on his Heisman campaign, and they lose to Georgia in overtime in the Rose Bowl. And now you have this Oklahoma team in 2025 losing and giving up another 17-point margin of victory on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. But the real question is, what does Oklahoma need to get that first ever college football victory? Like, they had the teams with the glorious offense, but their defense wasn't there. this year, this probably was one of their better defenses that they had, but their offense wasn't there. Is it timing? Is it, the coaching situation? Is it, trying to line up with the recruiting classes on when they want to get a heavy blown out offense going through, or a very strong defense? Like, it's in limbo, and I would say this Oklahoma team is really breaking itself down. But even on top of that, they even had 2 Heisman Trophy quarterbacks in the college football era, and they couldn't even get it done. They had Baker Mayfield, Kyle Murray, and they even had Jalen Hurts. And yet, again, ladies and gentlemen, they couldn't get it done. Granted, they did face some pretty tough competition, but that's what the playoffs are. It's the best of the best. It's not easy to get the job done in this manner of instance. Now, you got to look at it. Was Oklahoma moving to the SEC the right course of action? Obviously, for the money, yes, it makes the most sense. However, if they stayed in the Big 12, they would be probably one of the highest ranked conference champions and probably be on a bye, as we would know it. So it's one of those things where they would have played Texas Tech, and one of them would be playing for a home playoff game. The other would be playing for a bye. So that's how that would end up shaking out. But now they're in the midst of the SEC. The competition's fierce, and you can't make mental mistakes in the SEC, which is going to hurt Oklahoma long term. There's going to be years where they have to. They will always play. Most likely, they will play Texas every year because of the Red River. Then they have to rotate. You get years where you play Georgia, years that you play Ole Miss, years that you play Alabama on your schedule, years that you play LSU. Like, there's going to be years where they have a gauntlet where the teams that they're going up against are playoff caliber teams, and they have that signature style player momentum that you can't beat. And we saw that happen when they played Texas. Arch Manning did what he needed to do, and Oklahoma only got 7 points. So it's like, we didn't know what we were going to get with this Oklahoma team. It wasn't very consistent. They like to play their games close, and that's due because of their offense. Their quarterback had screws in his hand. So, like, it changes the whole dynamic of what Oklahoma has to do to get the job done, to get that first CFP victory. Like, literally, they brought, like, legends to Oklahoma last night to see the first home playoff game in Oklahoma. And yet they lose in that fashion. They give up 17 points. Halftime score is 17-17. And then that's when you knew, momentum was in the water, blood was in the water. And that was going to be the beginning of the end. Like, once Alabama scored, now it's like, oh no, the momentum's swinging. And they have to rally the troops. But it was little to no use. Alabama started to slowly pull away, but Oklahoma was trying to march back into that game. But now you got to ask yourself, what are they missing? What do they need? It feels like a Penn State, I want to say, for the most part, where they have certain pieces line up, but it's not enough to get the job done, ladies and gentlemen. So what I would do for Oklahoma, you got to get your recruiting cycle and your offense to be on the same page so you can get that elite offense with a solid defense to give you the best chances to win your first ever college football playoff, and if not advance, have a deep run at a national title. But that, again, it's baby steps, and you got to get your recruiting class down and figure out coaching trees and the right opportunity to build up a program to compete for national titles year in, year out. I think that's what they want to do. First steps first, you got to win the SEC. Now, you don't have to win the SEC to get into the playoffs, which is nice. But being a 11-1 team, not playing in the SEC title game, you will get like the benefit of Texas A&M. But it's not always guaranteed that you'll get an easy cupcake matchup. Miami is not a pushover in that sense, but it's one of those things you could luck up and get like a group of 5 for your matchup, being a 5th seed and not playing your conference championship game like Oregon. So that's what Oklahoma has to do. Get a nice 11-1 season and not playing the SEC title game, and then they might be set. And with that, like, if they lose close in the SEC title game, it's very possible they don't move, like what happened to Alabama this year. Like, they lost by 3 possessions, and most eyes, they should have been moved down. Because every team that played during their conference championship weekend all moved down a spot. Like, BYU moved down from like 10 to 11. and they miss the playoffs. And Ohio State loses to Indiana by 3. They move down to number 2. Like it's one of those things where it's like, please show consistency. I think that's the most thing that we have to end up looking at. But I think, like I said, for the future of Oklahoma, get your recruiting class together, build up when your offense is good with a good defense, and you could do fairly decent. But the thing with the SEC, it's very tricky to do and a very tough market to try to recruit and build that talent when you're in such a dense conference like the SEC. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's start talking about the other 3 matchups in the college football playoffs, where we start with the late slot and work up to noon, ladies and gentlemen. So in the slot that we were looking at, the 7:30 slot, ladies and gentlemen, we got JMU versus Oregon, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time today, ladies and gentlemen. Or if you're on the West Coast, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tall task for JMU on this day. Great that they made the college football playoffs. That is the first things foremost. Great season that they had, 12-1. Now they're facing Oregon, only lost to the number 1 team in the nation, Indiana, and Indiana had a great year as well, with Mendoza winning the Heisman Trophy. Now, for JMU, the talent gap against Oregon is going to be huge. So their game plan is they probably should take a thing out of Indiana's playbook and kind of go with that game plan a little bit, but also game management and making sure Oregon's offense stays off the field. That is the most critical thing that they have to do. Keeping Oregon's offense off the field and driving down the length of the field and taking the most amount of time that they can on each drive. Because the thing is, their D-backs will get beat day in and day out on top of that. But then you have to figure out what they need to do to win in this game. Like, they want to play it close. This game can easily get out of hand, and they'll be up 21-0 very, very fast. And the thing is, it's just a quick, streak route for Oregon, lob it up there, receiver catches it, boom, 40-yard touchdown pass or a 52-yard touchdown pass, and the game starts to get away from JMU. The thing is, for JMU, they're playing for the spread. I think we all know that as everything that's what's going on in college football, ladies and gentlemen. The spread is key in this instance. But when you look what JMU has done, they have been dominant all year long and beating teams convincingly, beating up on Washington State 24-20 in great fashion. But Oregon plays in the Big Ten, and Oregon's offense can start out slow, but it's one of those things, it puts on more pressure as the game progresses on throughout the day. Now, what we got here, ladies and gentlemen, is this. JMU has to play with poise, dedication, and a great campaign to pull this off. Now, what most likely will end up happening as time progresses on is the momentum of what has to be played, what has to be done for James Madison. But I think for the most part, this game is pretty much in the bag for the most part for the Ducks, and it's a great tune-up game. Not playing for 3 weeks, I think this is definitely what they needed to get back on the high horse, because them last year losing to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl probably hurts in the back of their mind, and noting that there's a gap playing. Is Oregon worried that this gap is going to hurt them and JMU is going to strike first, score the first touchdown, and things start to fall apart for Oregon? And they say, like, is this going to be like an Ohio State meltdown that we saw happen to them last year? Like, it's key things like that Oregon has to figure out. Can they do it? Can they just put this game away, make it easy, get a lot of reps in for players, and don't have to worry about, like, once they're up to a certain point, pull players out, rest them, because going in to Texas Tech is going to be not a bloodbath, but a physical contest with Texas Tech. And I think that is going to be an electric game between Oregon and Texas Tech in that sense, ladies and gentlemen. So that's probably what the thing is. Oregon has to take one game at a time. They can't look past James Madison and think, well, this is a group of 5. We'll beat them convincingly. Because once you have that mindset, that's when bad things start to happen to these teams. When they're like saying, we are not in trouble in this game. And then we get to the beginning of the 4th, and James Madison is only down by 3, and they start to believe. When you have a team that believes, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of those things that is hard to destroy their hope. Like, you got to put them away early. And once you put them away early, that's easy. Once you let them hang around, we see that every sports game where you leave a team, let them hang around for too long, that momentum swings, and then you start being way too conservative because you're overthinking it when you should just stay on the gas and just put the game out of its misery. But like I say, ladies and gentlemen, that is a critical thing that we have to figure out with what is Oregon have to do to make sure that their head's not too big and blow this game, put themselves in a weird, competition with James Madison. Like I said, it's not most likely going to happen, but it's college football and anything can happen. We've seen upsets with small schools taking down big schools. We've seen it. No school is safe in college football. If they pull up these big Cinderella stories, then it justifies the 12-team format, and the group of 5 can hang with the Power 4. That's what these two matchups are. Ole Miss, and same with Tulane and Ole Miss. That's what it is. It's, can the group of 5 hang and make the games competition? Last year, teams in the first round, they got beat by probably a margin of about 19 points. And what we end up seeing last night, 10-point margin, 2 possessions, and that was it for Alabama and Oklahoma. But now we're getting to the games where the talent gap is vastly large, and it's going to impact the outcome of the 12-team playoff. Now, we'll see how the games impact today, and we'll revisit the discussion next week, what that looks like in the post-game reviews of all the first-round playoffs and leading up into the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. But this is what we got going on. You can catch JMU Oregon 7:30 p.m. Eastern time today, ladies and gentlemen. So find your local sports bar, bring your favorite snack to your favorite seat in the house, and watch these games. Have a good time. If you're out and about, maybe trying to do last minute Christmas shopping, make sure you try to tune in as best you can, because I know the holidays season can be tough for the most part to get that done. But make sure, be responsible if you go out and about. Let's go into the next game, ladies and gentlemen, where we got Tulane and Ole Miss, ladies and gentlemen. For the most part, Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin is the topic of discussion. That is what people are worried about, what everyone is talking about. It's really the same team. The players haven't changed. It's the coaching. It's the play calling that's going to be impacted. Without your head coach, that's one thing. Like, maybe the offense might not click in the first few drives, but defensive coordinator did not change for Ole Miss. That did not change. And with that not changing, it's going to have a large implication for this Tulane squad. Even though Tulane did win the American convincingly, being Northern Texas, and a 34-21 victory, Ole Miss takes care of Mississippi State in the rivalry week with 38-19. But again, offense, I feel like for Ole Miss might start a little sluggish without their head coach, and they probably haven't got that feel until post, Mississippi State for the most part. So Ole Miss's game plan is probably easily run up the score, put Tulane out of misery, and that's relatively it. That is the simple bare bones into discussion for Ole Miss. Beat them physically, and you look towards playing, I want to say, Ohio State. No, you're playing Georgia. My bad. Ohio State will play the winner of Miami and Texas A&M. So Ole Miss has to might be thinking about Georgia again, what I said about Oregon. You got to take the games at a time. You got to take the game that is in front of you one at a time. You can't look in the future like we got this team, we got to focus on this team. Like, no, focus on today. Take care of business. No silly mistakes. Play mistake-free football to help you and mentally prepare for your next game. But again, play mistake-free, control possession, and make sure that you get players out so you don't wear them down for late postseason runs. That's the three things that are on Ole Miss's checklist for the most part. Now, Tulane, on the other hand, they got nothing to lose. They're going to be playing with heart today. They are playing with momentum. They're playing with the drive. They're playing with the passion. They are doing things that can't be messed with, like, which is why I'm saying these group of 5 matchups what we got today determines whether a playoff expansion is required. If they win today, it justifies what's going on for the most part. I know. I'm sorry for getting up, everybody. My dog had to come on in and say hello for me real quick. Now he's standing at the door. But ladies and gentlemen, Tulane has a tall task for them to do today. You coming? You going out, Luck? Thank you, buddy. Just like that, my dog had to leave, ladies and gentlemen. But like I said, with Tulane, they are there. They just got to cause some pandemonium. But the implication of a 12-team format, for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, is at stake today, with the group of 5 being in. For 2 group of 5 teams getting into the playoff field, which has, like I said, large implications. And do we need to go to a 14-team format? Do we need to go to a 16-team format? But then when we get to that discussion are we making the field too large and you're losing the intensity of the matchups, and you get to a point where the 16 seed team can't really beat the 1-seeded team? That's what we're looking at, the margin of gap in talent. We want good football games, not participation slots. That's what we want. We want the best teams in every year, each and every moment. We like that the group of 5 are in, but it's how they're getting in is what people are upset about. They win their conference, which everyone's saying conference championships matter, but the conferences are too large for some of these, like the Big Ten and SEC are way too large for that. And with the whole more teams consolidating, joining bigger conferences, you need to start reworking your conference championship format, or at least rework the playoff format where your conference championship is a part of the college football playoffs. Let's make that clear. You take the top 4 teams and you do a little bracket, and then you snake your way up to your conference champions of getting into the playoff field. I think that might be a good approach, but at the same time, I don't sit on the committee. I don't have a criteria in that. Maybe that makes no sense and it's a terrible idea, but it's one of those things that we have to go out there and test it out to see if it actually makes any sense. It works out and goes from there for the most part. But Tulane, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, for James Madison, control the ball, clock management, because Ole Miss can score on the dime, and play physical football. That's what they got to do. Be almost a smash mouth team, make the drives count, score when you can score, but touchdowns are needed to win this game. Field goals are nice, but to win this game, you need touchdowns. And they might get, 3 and then get a touchdown and then kick another field goal. We might see that for them, but I think the margin is going to get out of hand real fast. It might be 21-3 at half, or 28-3. And that's it. Tulane's done. Old Miss goes down and scores yet again. And it just becomes 35-3. And that's it. And everyone turns off their TVs. Start thinking about the NFL games that are happening later on in the day. That's what college football is going up against. We need the games to matter to deal with the NFL games that are happening on Saturday today. So that is what we have to look at for the most part for Tulane and for Old Miss today at 3:30. For my prediction, ladies and gentlemen, I think Old Miss will run away with this game. They're not going to have too much trouble, but they can't let their ego get away thinking that this is a cupcake team and put it out of their misery. Like, they have to play football today. They can't be saying, we'll only play a few quarters. No, you treat it as if it's not the national title, but a game where it's one of the big boys. Treat it like that. Find ways to treat it as if you are playing Georgia. Treat it like that, and you should be fine in this game. This is like the dress rehearsal for Georgia in my eyes. It's not the same caliber of players, but playing that mistake-free football is what's going to drive this discussion for sure, ladies and gentlemen. And let's start looking at the game in the noon slot, ladies and gentlemen, right close to everyone's expectations down in College Station. Can the Hurricanes of Miami stop the 12th man? Is it possible? Can they survive the threat of the 12th man? Or will the storm warnings of Miami blow A&M off course and destroy their hopes of reaching college football royalty and winning a national championship? These teams may not have an easy pathway. Think about it. Winner of this game plays Ohio State. And then after that, they will most likely play Georgia. And then possibly Indiana, which is not too bad. But then you got the Ducks. I mean, the Ducks are going to have their test with Texas Tech. But, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to have a tough gauntlet of teams that have defenses and offenses that can score. And these teams here have the polar opposites. Miami has a defense and likes to play physical. Texas A&M has the offense that wants to be lights out, guns a-blazing, and be able to put things away. The thing that I'm worried about with Texas A&M, which I've been talking with people about, is when's the last time they beat a physical team? They played Texas, who's a physical school in general across the board, and they lost. They lost to a physical team. And that's what happened to Notre Dame. When Notre Dame played Miami, Miami was more physical in that instance. But the more I look at the matchup for it, ladies and gentlemen, is the South Carolina game. Like, what happened to A&M? They came back 31-30, but you can't do that in the playoffs. Coming back from that margin is an instant loss to anything in the quarterfinals and semifinals. I guarantee you that's an automatic loss. But Miami, not playing in the ACC championship game, being idle for quite some time, they're hungry for a victory. Losing to SMU November 1st in overtime, 26-20, hurts. But they've been dominant across the board. They took care of Syracuse 38-10, NC State 41-7, Virginia Tech 34-17, Pitt 38-7. But when you look at A&M, yes, they beat LSU, but that was without Brian Kelly. Or maybe it was. I think it was without Brian Kelly. So it's 49-25. Then you got Missouri 38-17. Then you got South Carolina, like I said, 31-30, and they were getting blown out by South Carolina. Embarrassingly bad. That's how bad I'm talking about. So bad that you just think, well, they just lost their chances at the college football playoffs because they know they still got Texas and they lost their spot for the SEC title game. Losing to Texas basically cost them that, but I digress on the status of what that actually meant for them. But like I said, we don't know what this A&M team's doing. If they get behind, they can claw their way back. But if their defense just keeps giving up points after points after points after points, it's not there for them. They will lose this game. Like I said, Miami has to play physical today. The game's at noon Eastern, which is basically fine for these two schools. 11 a.m. Central Time is fine kickoff. Miami noon East Coast time. Like, it's not one of those late games. We're out on the West Coast, and it's like, 10 o'clock Eastern when you're playing this game. No, I'm joking with that. But, 4:30 Pacific time, versus 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Like, biologically, your clocks are different when you travel time zones, but when it's only an hour difference, it's really not much noticeable for the most part. The 12th man will be there in full force. Miami has to be smart. They can't get costly penalties in this game. It's the name of the playoffs. Mistake-free football. I just need to make a t-shirt, ladies and gentlemen, that says the requirements to win important big games. Mistake-free football should be on that list. Or no dumb penalties is another good one that you can add. Time management and knowing your strengths and weaknesses and what your opponent's, capability is of just taking care of business for the most part and winning what you need to do for this game. A&M, for the most part, is probably upset that they didn't play in the SEC title game, but they're probably happy that they didn't. Granted, yeah, you don't get a bye, but I think they actually need this home playoff game. They need to fine tune themselves, and with that physical opponent, they need this physical opponent because it's not going to be easy playing against Ohio State's defense. Let's make that clear. Ohio State's defense can keep teams at bay without a problem. You got to find ways to score against it, and A&M. If you survive today, you're about to face a true competition that you have not seen before. The last time the team that hung around Ohio State was Texas, and that was week 1. And Ohio State's a vastly different team from what it was at week 1 to where it is now. Let's make that clear. But A&M going to the Cotton Bowl, again, another home game for Texas A&M for the most part. Another game that they need to take care of. But again, I don't think they're looking ahead. They're not looking ahead. They got to take care of Miami today. Miami, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, ACC has been disrespected all year. They've been beating each other up. Georgia Tech, I thought, was going to be the team that should be in the playoffs, but they ended up blundering late in the season and falling off. Pitt causing some pandemonium, knocking teams out. And then somehow Duke winning the ACC championship game on top of that. And Duke was not in the college football playoffs. So make it make sense, the ACC. You are riding on the status of what's going to happen to the ACC if they don't win. Like, it's very possible that's the next conference that ends up breaking up. And Clemson, NC State, North Carolina might join the SEC with Florida State, but we all know Florida State won't be able to join because Florida will probably veto it. Miami might be in the same board of joining, but again, I could see Florida vetoing that as well. South Carolina will probably prevent Clemson from getting in as well. So, like, the ACC is kind of stuck. The teams are evenly matched, and everyone's beating each other up, and that's impacting where they get seated in the college football playoffs. Let's make that clear, everybody. But I think, for the most part, that, I don't know, it's a noon kickoff, it's high noon showdown. There's really the implication of just college game day and its presence just there to cause pandemonium. They love in the chaos, right? That what they got going on. And everyone knows what's going to be at stake. Now, the question is, how do you avoid injuries in a physical game like this? If you get too exhausted next week, you're dealing with your quarterfinals on New Year's Eve. So to give you that perspective, ladies and gentlemen, on the 31st of December, which is on let's say a Wednesday this year. You play today, and you got 11 days to prepare for Ohio State. Yes, that's enough time to prepare, but then you got the holidays and people really not thinking about it. So you got to rally the troops for that quarterfinal matchups. You want to have a great new year. You want to have that magical moment and win in the Cotton Bowl. But it's not easy. You got to be this is where you put your physical competition to the test. This is how you get that playoff run started. You get that tough team and you punch them a little bit. You beat them up a little bit. You show them who's boss and get the job done. That's what we like. You have a little smash mouth football, run the ball, traditional, but that's not how this is going to work. A&M is going to try to air it out. They're going to try to spread the field and find ways to score electric and fast. Miami, defense. Defense is your name of your game. Shut down the receivers, put pressure onto the quarterback, and they will fold. Texas A&M will fold in that game. 100%. They will fold into that matchup. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is what we're looking for Miami today, ladies and gentlemen. I think Miami's going to find a way to squeak this one out. It's going to be close. It's going to come down to the wire. They keep Texas A&M's offense off the field, and this is their game for the taking. Now, on the other hand, like I said, Texas A&M's job, light up the scoreboard, create the margins. You know you can't rely on your defense because your defense has just been that bad all year. And what you got to do, like I said, they just got to all gas today. You just can't let up scoring. If they stall in this game, A&M, they might be in trouble. If they're stalling in the red zone and Miami keeps doing goal line stance and forcing A&M to kick field goals, there is a chance that Miami will win it because of that reasoning. And Miami has that physical defense. And A&M's last time they played a physical defense was Texas. And they almost lost to South Carolina. That South Carolina victory looms large, and everyone knows it, and everyone will keep talking about it up until kickoff today, ladies and gentlemen. Don't know what they got to do to get the job done, but that is where they stand. That is where they need to do to get the job done today. So for my prediction, I like Miami and a close one. Probably going to be maybe I like 31-17 or the 24. I like 31-24. That's what I like. I like 31-24. Miami ends up winning it for the most part. Now, let's start taking a quick look at the next matchup in the quarterfinals, which we can go into higher detail. More, I mean, we can break more of that, the next round matchups, but I kind of want to give like a quick preview of my expectations for the quarterfinal games, in 11 days. So we got our first one in the matchup, ladies and gentlemen, in Pasadena. We got Indiana, Alabama. Like I said, I don't want to give too much of an analysis on it because we still got to talk about it for next week and the whole strategy. But we got some things that we have to figure out for Indiana for the most part. What they got to do to beat this Alabama team that has the weirdest consistency that we've seen for quite some time. On top of that, but not something that we can overcome. They have right now, I would say, after beating Ohio State, Indiana might have a little bit of an ego boost right now. And they might get level setted against Alabama, but they beat Alabama, it might be even worse. Like they are going to start to believe a lot more. We like the confidence, but we got to make sure they don't turn that confidence into cockiness. And that's what I'm worried about for this Indiana team going into Pasadena. It's a stage too bright being in Pasadena. If they were in the Orange Bowl, would this be fine for them? I think it's being in the Rose Bowl is the biggest stage for them. For them, it is possibly the national championship game in their eyes because it's one or done, and then you still got the semifinals on top of that to deal with. Now, Indiana and Alabama. We saw what Alabama can do. When that defense wants to turn up and create turnovers, it will create turnovers. And we saw that happen to Oklahoma today, ladies and gentlemen. Like, not today, yesterday. Indiana knows how to clock management. They did it against Oregon. They did it against Ohio State. Like, we've seen them play teams. They can do 2-minute drives against a weak Penn State team, but that defense still was functioning. But that offense was bad. But we need to figure out, ladies and gentlemen, can Indiana do it? Can they get past this hurdle, being in their second ever college football playoffs, and their only losses last year was to the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes and the runner-up as in Notre Dame. They're not dealing with Notre Dame this year, but now they have their next hurdle, Alabama. They beat Ohio State. They beat one of those hurdles. I wouldn't say hurdles, one of those mountains. They are climbing at a great rate. And Indiana's head coach turned that program around in 2 years and having back-to-back double-digit win season, 11-1, winning your conference the next season. That is great coaching right there. I mean, luck of the schedule, but they could be in another one-loss team and be playing in the first round of the college football playoffs, but they're the 1 seed and they got the bye. And I think as we look at the 1 seed as time progresses on, the 1 seed might not be the coveted seed anymore. You might actually want to lose on purpose, depending on how that shakes out. Like, you lose to a good team, but you're not dealing with the 8 and 9 matchup, which the 8 and 9 matchup has been Power 4 teams that actually are deadly threats that could be, in reality, a number 1 team, I would say, for the most part. But like I said, I don't want to get too much in details because I want to say that for next week on what the whole strategy they have to do to beat Alabama in this matchup, ladies and gentlemen. But it's one of those things where you got to look what Indiana has, the pageantry of the Rose Bowl, the history for the Big Ten. Last time Alabama was in the Rose Bowl, they lost to Michigan. So a lot of those players might have possibly graduated, if not fifth years at this point, because that was like in the midst of coming out. Well, not even that, like around like 23, because it was like 2 years ago, I want to say. Yeah, about 2 years ago. So you got that on a lot of the younger Alabama players who played during that time. They're back at this stage, and they won't let this opportunity slip away from them a second time in Pasadena, the champion of the Roses for college football, the granddaddy of them all. And I guarantee you they're going to find a way to get a victory out of there. They're going to try to be physical. They're going to try to out-muscle Indiana. Out-muscle Indiana. They're going to try to play SEC football and try to go like an Alabama of old and just attack, and just keep grinding down Indiana as time progresses on in that matchup. When that sun goes down and those Pasadena lights start to flicker on and you see the landscape, you know you're in for a classic showdown, a classic that comes down to the wire, a thrill where you're at the edge of your seat and seat is packed to the brim to see this opportunity in this matchup that we never thought was going to be. It's going to be a sea of red in that stadium. You would feel like it's an Indiana home game based on how their season's going. But you know that crimson tide that rolls, that floods the whole system will be there. Will it be down the middle? Will we see Indiana red, crimson red, 50-yard line split on top of that? Is that what we're going to get? Is it enough? Is it enough to get the dream? Are we there to see Indiana slay the giant of Alabama? Like I was saying earlier in the seasons, once the tide starts rolling, it's dangerous. And the tide is rolling yet again, knocking off on an arch rival of Oklahoma and revenging their loss that happened earlier in the season. It's there. Can Indiana keep their momentum and have the most miraculous season in program history? It's already going that way. Their story looks bright, and it just keeps building up its momentum for the most part, ladies and gentlemen. I like to see Indiana do the unthinkable, beat Alabama, and give them a better shot at the national championship. I kind of want to see them do it. They got the story. The media is behind them, and America is behind Indiana this year. And I don't think anyone's saying we want Indiana to lose. They want Indiana to win. A lot of people want Indiana to win. If Ohio State gets knocked out, I could see myself cheering for this Indiana bandwagon. But again, I'm going to be with Ohio State till the very end of the matchup of what they got going. For them, it's Georgia and then whoever comes out of Indiana side of the bracket to win the national championship game. But Indiana, Alabama, like I said earlier, we'll talk more about that next week of the breakdown and all that stuff going on for college football going into the first quarter finals in 11 days from now. But outside of college football playoff talks, let's talk about the elephant in the room with Michigan's head coach situation. I think before I start streaming today, Arizona State coach got signed on for a contract for $7.5 million in extension, I want to say on top of that. So the scenario we got going on for the Michigan head coach scenario. I mean, we have a couple ideas what we could see. The unlikely scenario. Michigan gets Lincoln Riley to leave USC. I don't think he can leave USC. It's one of the blue bloods. It's one of those things. You got a good job. You can recruit. You should be fine there. But they could poach him if they wanted to. And the Michigan has the brand recognition to get them that talent. But Lincoln Riley is a offensive minded person and wants to score. Michigan is a hard-nosed type of university, and they want to basically grind you down like on a grinding stone. So Lincoln Riley, I would say, is out of the picture. Now you have Brian Kelly, Chip Kelly, and John Gruden as possible head coach. Brian Kelly, what happened at LSU? I don't know if Michigan really wants that. They want to get back to the Michigan standard, being, as Dave Portnoy says it, the Michigan men and the Michigan standard. But you got to look at what you need. Chip Kelly coached the Ohio State national championship team. So you can build an offense around Chip Kelly if you want to go down that route to beat Ohio State. You can do that and get Michigan to have that offense. But you're going to need a defensive-minded personnel to get you through to win a lot of those close games that Michigan's been going up to. They need an offensive team to get them going, but also still be very physical, because the Michigan teams that we've seen have been, you're grinded out, run the ball and all that stuff. But if they want to keep that progression going, John Gruden makes the most sense. You got to get the old Gruden grind, as he likes to say, the old Gruden grinders of John Gruden. For the most part, ladies and gentlemen, he will run that Michigan ball without a problem. Like, he can set that standard high up to where it is. Players want to treat it as if they want to get it into the NFL. Having that NFL coach changes players, but that it's not always necessary to change, which happened to North Carolina with Bill Belichick. But Bill Belichick had a lot of distractions this season and all that for the most part. Now, you can fathom with the idea of them getting a coach that can do it, but they want to set standards. They want to get back to the Michigan that wins, competes for Big Ten championships, national championships. That's what they really want as a coach. They want the coach focusing on the academics and building a championship caliber team on top of that, as well as getting players ready for the draft. Their quarterback room is not the best quarterback room. They get good running backs. They'll get a physical defense. Like that is Michigan football. They are a smash mouth team, and they play that way, and they want to keep that image, and I respect them for trying to keep that image as best they possibly can. But let's make it clear. If we want to throw a nice, fun, hypothetical scenario out there, which is off the rails and break every rule possible, is make Tom Brady the head coach of Michigan. I just want to see that. Like I said, if he's the head coach at Michigan, he will change things that we have never seen them do. He will build a good quarterback room. He will help that quarterback manage games that we haven't seen managed before, win close games, and how to close it out. The problem is we got to see how Tom Brady coaches. That's the first thing that we have to figure out. Like it might be a Belichick scenario where it sounds good in hindsight, but it doesn't make sense. And I don't think Tom Brady kind of wants that. He rather play. Seeing Phillip Rivers get out there and play probably has Tom Brady feel some type of way, but now Tom Brady is the owner of a partial minority owner of the Raiders, so he can't do that technically. So for him seeing that, I think college might be a great option to venture and explore and take that on, like taking Michigan and beating Ohio State. But is he that type of coach player, or was he just a player and that's it? That's the question that we're all trying to figure out for the most part for Michigan and all that stuff. What is going on for them? I mean, yeah, you got the rumor mills like can they get Urban Meyer? Like Urban Meyer's not going to join Michigan. Let's squash that rumor. Easy in, easy out. No discussion needed. But the thing is, does Michigan go after Deion Sanders and get him out of Colorado? Like, I don't think Deion would leave. I mean, Deion would possibly leave Colorado, but does he want the heat of a blue blood? Like, he could go to Florida State and turn that program around if he wanted to. But riding with the blue blood mentality and the brand image of the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world, and USCs of the world, same with Notre Dame. Do you want that attention on you each and every day from boosters, from the student base, the alumni network? Do you really want to deal with that? Or is Colorado, like for Deion says, is Colorado the right spot? Your expectations start to level out because you don't have the team that has the firepower, but you're doing games, you're coaching, you're winning games, and your goal is to win the conference and get eventually into the college football playoffs. But when you have these Michigans of the world, for them, it's a national championship and to beat your rival. That's what it is. For them, it's beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, and national championship. Now, with the Big Ten being so loaded as it is, I feel like the coveted win the Big Ten has lost its value a little bit. Because look at Oregon. They're 11-1, and they didn't play in the Big Ten championship game, and they have a shot to win a national championship. That's what happened to Ohio State. Didn't get in, but they won the national championship. So I think the value of what Michigan has right now is beat Ohio State and win the national championship. Those are the two things on the resume, and then third is probably win the Big Ten. But with how, like I said, how stacked the Big Ten is, it's very difficult to get there taking only the top two teams. And if you accidentally lose, now you eliminated yourself because there's a weird tiebreaker out and about on top of that. So we'll see how the coaching carousel goes. And as the college football season starts to head to a close, we might see more talkings of what we got going on for Michigan. But I feel like they might just wait until after the season's completed and call that a day for them. I know they're trying. They're probably flying a lot of coaches to figure it out and all that stuff. But that is what I will put in for the coffin for the Michigan head coach story thus we got so far. Now, let's talk about a hypothetical, what we got going on today. We have the remaining 3 first-round playoff games today. And the biggest thing that a lot of people are concerned are blowouts. With blowouts on the horizon, what does that mean for the college football playoffs? Expansion won't fix the blowouts. Let's make that clear. The NIL money is going to get way too insane as time progresses on. People know that, and CEOs will get involved with it. They will buy coaches. They will prevent coaches from going to certain schools. And the list will go on and on about that. If the group of 5 teams get embarrassingly blowed out, what happens to them? Like, it gets people frustrated when BYU only 2 losses were to the 4th seed of Texas Tech, and that's it, and they're out. And there's a good chance that they probably could beat Ole Miss. They probably won't beat Oregon, but they could probably be an Ole Miss without a head coach. They could possibly do it. Or same with Notre Dame. Notre Dame could be playing Ole Miss, and they get left out because they're not a conference champion. It's stuff like that that concerns a lot of people of college football. Like, there is so deregulated. Well, there's not even regulations at this point for NIL, which is a large, I wouldn't say issue, but a large piece of the puzzle that's still getting mapped out and ironed out and figured out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. But it's one of those things that we have to sit there and realize we want to keep the values of conference championships alive, but how the committee ranks a team when it loses a conference championship has not been consistent or very dramatized for losing the conference championship. You also have to focus on, if they expand it, does the expansion go into taking your conference champions and do a little small mini playoff bracket where you take the top 4, where they have semifinals and it funnels into your Big Ten or your conference championship game, and you take your winners of your conference championship game, and you put those teams in the playoff format. And I don't think people will be upset for that point. But then you have, again, Notre Dame and the independents, and you're forcing teams to join a conference. I would say Notre Dame should join the ACC. They would win that pretty more convincingly. I would say, 7 out of 10 chance of them to win it is pretty high, I would say, for the most part, unless there's an injury or something like that. They're a team that can recruit well, and they can be a lot of the teams in the ACC without a problem, but also lose to teams in the ACCs that they shouldn't lose to. So it's a good fit. They shouldn't join the Big Ten. It's way too densely populated, but it will get them more TV rights and more money, and where they're geographically located, the Big Ten makes sense. You got Purdue, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, Northwestern, all right there in their own backyard, and traveling for that fan base is easier because they're literally everywhere. It's like Cowboys fans, they're literally everywhere. But it's just one of those things that we have to figure out where the college football playoffs is headed. I know in the offseason we'll take a look at the outcomes of everything. We'll do a small segment to bring the college football season to a true actual close after January 19th, after the national championship game is played, and we start rolling to college hoops. But it's just one of those things that just doesn't add up for the most part, what we got going on. Most likely, everyone's going to say playoff expansion is going to fix it, but I don't think adding 16 teams in the rankings will fix it. I think we have to go with the, top 4 conference teams that could play in the conference championship game, make them play in a conference championship format, take the winner of that, put those in the playoffs, and then that's where you can kind of bring in extra teams, or at least bring the runner up into the mix, and that will be fine. But then it's like, you have a chance to get into the college football playoffs if you're the 1 or 2 team. But then again, it ruins your chances of adding value to the conference championship. I think that's the problem. I think the biggest problem is the conference. One of the biggest problems is the conference championship. It's the weight, the magnitude, and the value of it that the committee changes from year to year. What that makes sense, because we had the Florida State team that went undefeated, and they get left out because they were on their third string quarterback and they weren't the same team. So we got to figure that out. And that's where we're going to lead ourselves off with, ladies and gentlemen, going and preparing for the next round of college football playoffs. So make sure you tune into next week's episode of Gridiron Gridlock. Thank you so much. Everyone have a safe and happy Christmas or whatever holidays you celebrate, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, along those lines. There are any holiday traditions that you got going on. Please be safe, be responsible. If you have a real Christmas tree, make sure you water it so you don't have a fire that happens when you have your lights on in your house. So please be safe, everyone. I know the holidays can be stressful, not the best time for everyone. But if you have friends that go through a hard time during these times, please reach out to them. Please check up on them. They really appreciate it. They might not express it, but deep down, they truly appreciate you when you reach out to them. I know most people, might not always have the time to respond, but they really do appreciate it. But so thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Gridiron Gridlock, and we'll catch you here next week. So long for now. Bye-bye.